Doing it live. As soon as I figure out. Yeah. Should have prepared. Oh well. Um, okay. Hopefully, I'm actually sharing. All right. So, since LII was a thing that was brought up a lot, oh, I think I fucked it up. Yeah, that's okay. I'll figure that out in a moment. Since LII was a thing that was brought up a lot, there was a bunch of new LIIs that wanted to talk about LII, and they wanted to talk about the system and everything else. Like, okay, why not? Might as well discuss LII stuff as soon as I can get this up and going right. Bam. All right. See, computer my thing. All right. So LII. Let's start with this first. This is just kind of a quick, hasty done breakdown of the LII in terms of their cognitive functions or their elements, etc., depending on which system you come from, right? If you're from the MBTI world, you're used to calling all this stuff functions. Socionics, functions refers to the spot, the position that we're referring to, like the base function, the creative function, the vulnerable or polar function, the role function. All right, so it's this type of functions, the positioning. When you're referring to TI or NE or SE or any of those things, we don't call them functions in socionics. We call those elements, information elements. Okay, it's a little bit of tidying up on the vocabulary there. Now, here, this is basically model A, the classic model, the standard, original, old school kind of model. It's the most popular one, it's the one most widely used. Hence, it's the one most widely talked about. All right. Model G is another one that's very common to hear about online and so on, but it's structured a little bit differently. It's rearranged a little bit differently, and it kind of defines some of the positions a little differently. Right. So, for clarity's sake, we're talking about classic model A right now. So, this is how it goes. TINE, as in the ego block, this is what you're really good at and very much aware of it. Okay. In the super ego, the SE and FI is what you suck at, and you're likely very aware of it. This is the mental area. Oftentimes, it describes in there you're very much aware of what you're good at and what you suck at, okay, in general. And it's also stuff that is very noticeable to an outside observer who's looking at you. They can probably tell relatively quickly that these are things that you're good at up here in the ego block and you're using a lot, and that this stuff down here, the SEFI or in the super ego, is the stuff you suck at, or it's just missing. You're not seemingly using it at all. You're ignoring it. It's just not there. It's not good. Right? Down here in the vital areas, for the super id, you have the SI and the FE, stuff that you're not particularly good at, but you're trying to be better at. You do like it. You do value it. And then in the id block, stuff that you're good at, but ultimately you don't really like to use it, you don't care about very much. And you see where all the different elements are in their positions. Okay. This is something for you to make reference to over and over again as we continue to talk about things. So there's that. And now I realize I have this crap in the way. Okay. So let's go to we got to try playing around with this crap some more. So one of the things that popped up a lot yesterday about like military structure and whether that's very TI or is it TE. Why is it TI? Why is it being referred to that way? I should not have done it that way. But oh well. Here's a bit on TI. Hopefully you can see this. You should be able to. And what it's often referred to. Where is this coming from? This is coming from Typology. This is Ibrahim Tencer's site. I'm going to use multiple sites just to show you how they're basically all saying the same thing. But I'm just starting with this one, okay? Notice TI, structure, order. While TE is responsible for gathering data, TI seeks to structure that data, put it all, package it into something, okay, that has consistency all throughout it. Consistent rules, consistent method. And in order to make that, you have to make sure things are very clear. Okay, you have to define things very carefully. And you'll notice this when you're observing somebody who's very TI heavy. They're very interested in looking for the structure of things, where everything goes, making sure things are defined and worded correctly. A lot of high TI users will get very interested in vocabulary, terminology. They're very interested in being very precise on their word usage. By comparison, types that are very low on TI can often run into the problem of talking a lot and saying all kinds of stuff, but they're very unclear as to what they're saying. They're not very good at being very exacting about what they're talking about. Okay, it's something you'll notice through observation. I don't think I want to read through all this. Let's see what's interesting here. I don't want to read through all of it, but whatever you can. Okay, TI is responsible for both apprehending and creating structure, but creating structure in the internal world, or external world, excuse me, may involve application of SE. So it's very structure based. TE, by comparison, is very much just looking at, okay, what do we know to work? What are the facts? How do I use it? I don't need some kind of coherent structure. It's not relevant for TE individual. For TI individuals, once they start, what have I done here? Nice this crap. Yeah, what a show I'm putting on here with presenting a screen, huh? Okay, yeah, and I see Insertosage. Not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, but you wrote in there, define your terms. Yeah. TI, heavy TI users, okay, really pay a lot of attention to stuff like that. Clarity of thought, clarity of what is it you're trying to say, what are you trying to communicate to everybody, and use the most crisp, precise wording possible to do it. Defining your terms, right? They'll often say that. Or if they don't say that directly, you can see that's what they're getting at. There's a lot of individuals. I was actually watching an interview on Netanyahu. Did I say his name right? Yeah. Netanyahu yesterday or something like that. An old interview he had, and you can see it in him. Very, very clear when he's listening to debates about what should be done with Palestinians, what should be done about this. And he's very clear. This is what you mean when you say that. Okay, if you say that, then this should follow. This is how this works, right? Very, very good for legal kind of discussions as well. Now, in Netanyahu, you know who I'm talking about, Netanyahu, okay, Prime Minister for Israel right now. In my case, I think he's probably an LSI, could be an SLE though. All right, either way, you're looking at a lot of TI usage. All right, so In the case of how does this relate to military stuff, TI with SE is more that forceful. This is the structure. This is the way we do it. That's how it is. And we're going to enforce that. You will adhere to this structure. You will adhere to these rules, or there will be consequences, or there will be action taken for it. Okay. So TI with SE is when you get that logical structure, that TI that applies towards military stuff. Okay. So that was coming from yesterday. Now, in the case of LII, which is what we're talking about, it's not with SE. You have TI with NE. You have a lot of abstraction going on. So usually your LIIs are not quite as solid. They don't appear in conversation or in interactions. They don't always seem quite so solid, rigid, determined on what they believe. They're not going to act on it a lot. They maintain a certain open-mindedness to take in new information, to question their models and say, do I have it right? Is my structure perfect? Is it ironclad, or did I miss something? Maybe there's something else I need to get into or whatever, right? So there's a certain questioning of their own viewpoints within themselves, okay? They're also much more welcoming to a variety of different opinions, different viewpoints. They're always kind of absorbing new ways of looking at it as a way to look at their model from different angles and different points of view and really try to see, did I see everything? Did I get it all? Is there something I'm missing? Is there something needs to be added? They have that open-mindedness to their structures and the ways of thinking. Now, unfortunately, or fortunately, I guess depends on your point of view, because they're so abstract, it's very TI with NE, but they're also very good, so it's a lot of abstracting going on, and they're SE polar, they're very slow to act upon their structures, their models, their thinking that they've created, basically. They take a long time to really think it through, really analyze it, really keep turning it over, keep looking at new stuff, keep looking, what else have I missed? What else, before they actually do something about it. What do I mean when I say do something about it? I mean, publish a book, write a research paper up on it, get out there and start advocating for it, enforcing those rules if people break those rules. They don't really do that. It takes them a very long time to do that. They don't really want to do that. Okay. That's in big part also to being SE vulnerable. And I lost my little chart, but okay. Okay. That's in part of being SE vulnerable, right? They're very slow. So that's a very common critique, let's call it, of LIIs. I recall a story when they were talking about, well, Keirsey talking about himself. David Keirsey, who wrote Please Understand Me Too and has his whole system. He's considered an LII as well. One of the stories about him was that he would come up with these ideas on his theories and his structure and yada, yada, yada. And he had like a secretary or somebody who said, you know, instead of just rambling on about this stuff on your private time, why don't you talk to me about it and we're going to write it all down. We're going to create notes. We're going to create slides. We're going to create whatever and start putting it down so you can start incorporating into your lectures and teaching your students and stuff like that. Right. The point of that story is that it's showing, again, an LII spending a lot of time constructing some kind of framework on how they view people and categorize them and putting these ideas together, but it took a long time for them to actually act on it in the real world, do something. In fact, it didn't happen until someone else kind of pushed that LII to kind of go, yeah, let's start writing it up. Very common critique for LIIs. It's one of the things I went on and on about yesterday that drives me crazy. A lot of LIIs can come up with some good stuff or know some good stuff, but they'll take forever to finally act on it. When I say forever, this is relative, right? There are other types that like to move a lot faster. They like to get after it quickly. So from those types' point of view, when they look at the LII, they get frustrated very quickly. Okay. What other stuff do we want to get into here? Let's see if I can. I already showed the Ibrahim Tenser's version of it. Let's look at another little generic version. This is from sociotype.com, which is a very nice, pretty website, very popular one too. Has a lot of stuff in here that you see is pretty similar. Here's the themes: TI, analysis, identification, understanding, order, system, or systematizing, structure, and formal logic. This is why a lot of these types, especially the LII, tend to be really, really good in more academic fields or interested in them. A lot of them can talk about wanting to be professors, especially college professors and teachers. Many of them like going into certain fields where this kind of formal logic is emphasized. So physics, mathematics, stuff like that is super cliche. But they can go into other fields too, where they want to look for the underlying principles that govern that field. Could be economics, so looking for the underlying structure of how all economics works, how it's always worked. Here are the principles of it. Could be sociology. These are the social guiding principles that have been there throughout time and always work, etc. Right? Very common. That's the theme here. States of mind. TI, clarity and exactitude of thought, a sense of order and regularity in different levels of structure, a sense of building a complete system from simple and well understood parts. Now, this is kind of where you can see, if you're coming from an MBTI background or something like that, you can see how we're kind of talking about the same thing a little bit, right? You can see with these high TI types, they like to spend a lot of time thinking and crisply defining stuff, coming up with a structure where it's either this or it's that. Something has to go into this category or it goes into that category. What determines which category it goes into? Well, there has to be a certain criteria that defines why this thing goes here and that thing goes there. And they're spending a lot of time really putting all that together. Some people can describe that as deconstructing. Say you're deconstructing a topic, breaking it down to all these little pieces, sifting through and making sure it all makes sense, and then rebuilding and making sure you're putting all those pieces together. And that's this sense of building a complete system from simple and well understood parts. Okay, very TI thing to do. Very high TI types are all doing this stuff. Let's see. Let me see. We got some comments here. Let's see. Jared over here. LI Kiersey's temperaments are a three-dimensional model, i.e. panoramic holographic cognition. Again, this is coming from Galenko stuff. It's a lot of questionable stuff on his cognitive styles of thinking, which would be interesting to see more about. Yup, that's why I love studying economics at college. There you go. So LIIs often get this stereotype of they're always physicists or mathematicians or something like that, which, yeah, there's a lot of them that do that. You can find a lot of them in areas like that. But you don't have to be a mathematician to be an LII. There are LIIs who go into other fields. Psychology, for example, which is a social science, right? Kiersey was in social science. A number of other individuals. Galenko, who's an LII. Psychology, right? Jack from World Socionics Society, he's a psychologist, right? So economics is something you'll see other people interested in. So again, just because you're an LII doesn't mean it has to be mathematics. It could be a bunch of other stuff. Galenko's temperament, receptive, yeah. Okay, I don't know what that's really about. You have to elaborate. Adam Smith, considered to be the father of economics, is thought to think of as an LII. Maybe. So that's a good transition point, right? So a lot of LIIs will one of the things they excel at when you're looking at a historical figure who could be an LII, or maybe somebody in the current day who could be LII, one of the things you're looking at broadly, you just take a step back and let's look at the person holistically. What are they good at? What do they seem to be doing a lot of? What are they interested in? A lot of interested in building a structure, building a model, a concept, using an abstract one, okay, almost always an abstract one, that shows the underlying principles of how a particular field or discipline works, right? It's often very theoretical, is what. So you could take Smith. I don't know if he actually is an LII, but you could take someone like him or other people who speculated on the underlying fundamentals of economics, for example, and they put together a system and they give you all these reasonings, and this is why it works this way, this is how it's always worked, etc. Well, it's somebody acting in the theoretical, looking for these universal principles that apply and writing it all down, creating their own principles, basically, right? Showing a lot of ability in the TI and abstract realms. Okay. You have philosophers, Kant being famous for this, very structured, putting down rules. This is how it works. It's how it always works. This is the universal truth for it. Okay. Even again, Kiersey, Galenko, right? What are they doing? They looking around at how these psychological types and things work, and they're trying to come up with, this is the structure of how it all works. This is how we define this from that. This is what makes this type this type that. Let me put all the details in there. That's how everybody fits into all these things. It's all very theoretical. It's very hard to prove any of those things. But they put well-reasoned justification or logic as to why this goes here and that goes there. And then they work very hard at defining their terms, defining what is TI, what is SE, what is this. Does it all logically make sense and cohere? And then we keep building. They spend a lot of time doing this kind of stuff. So it is super nerdy. Okay. When you take all the 16 types, LIIs are one of those types that are just notoriously super nerds in the classic, just layman's terms version of nerd. Okay. That's why it's very common to see a lot of LIIs in interviews and stuff. Love school, want to be professors, or do a job where they get to spend a lot of time researching and developing some concepts or ideas that they really like. That's generally what they're trying to do a lot. I should have brought up. I'd bring up more examples of TI, but I think at this point we've beaten that horse to death. All right, you can look at Wikisocion, which is the big encyclopedia that most people do. You're seeing a lot of the same shit. Okay. More examples of TI. I already mentioned Kiersey. I mentioned Galenko as two major figures within typology. And you can just observe them. Just watch what they're doing. Okay. Another character you could see who's a pretty good example of LII. Go check out Ben Vaselin's channel and look at what Ben is doing. He's really, really playing with models, playing with everyone's model. This is a key piece, right? LIIs have TI and NE. So they're very interested in looking at different possibilities, different systems. How do they all connect? Where do they connect? Where do they not connect? And just piling it all in there, spending an enormous amount of time doing that. If you go check out Ben Vaselin's channel, just observe him. You see him doing that. You see him using Kiersey. He's using Linda Behrens. He's using Dario Nardi. He's using Galenko. He's using some MBTI concepts. He's using Enneagram. He just keeps going. There's like 8 systems like interacting with each other in there, and he's pointing it out constantly. So LIIs are much more open-minded to all these different models. It's almost like they don't like to eliminate certain models. They don't disregard them. So you'll see this a lot. This is that panoramic, holographic, cognitive style thinking that Jared was mentioning at. Kind of bringing all the things together and coming at it with this assumption that all these models are looking at the same thing just from a different angle. And I want to see it from every angle and keep using that. Now, that's different from some other types. Let's say like a TI with SEs, some of the beta quadrant types. They might look at certain things and disregard them. They might say, okay, that's what this system is, that's what that system is, that's what that system is. I like this one, this is the one that makes most sense. Forget the rest of them. Or forcibly push the rest of them out of the way. Okay. Other types will do this too. Some of the ILEs, the ENTPs, can do this too. Some of gammas as well will also do that. Look at certain, I like that one, forget the rest of them, push it out of the way, right? LIIs don't do that usually. You'll notice a lot of the LIIs instead are kind of bringing them all in, trying to get them to all work together and coalesce. Instead of pushing some in and some out, they're bringing them all in and trying to use them all simultaneously and create some kind of a super system. So a lot of times you'll hear comparisons that LIIs are the physicist types who are trying to look for the theory of everything, this universal principle that always works and answers everything. Just like they're trying to create a super system. That's kind of a little cliched thing that gets talked about a lot. But why is that? Because you'll see a lot of LIIs bringing all these things together and trying to put them all in and make them work instead of just eliminating some. What is there's a phenomenon of typing non-human entities like, hold on, let me see what we got here. Forgot I can do that. There's a phenomenon of typing non-human entities like ideologies or groups of movements, which I find silly, but there must be some truth to this practice since many people tend to agree on results. Of typing non-human entities. Well, I'm going to interpret that to mean like, oh wait, we got more. Concepts like totalitarian, which is heavily reliant on external systems. Typed as TE. Concepts like totalitarian, which is heavily reliant on external systems, which offer no exceptions to policy, are you typed as TE. This is kind of where things differ if you're looking at it from like how MBTI comes across it, or some within more of a Carl Jungian approach specifically. When you come into Socionics territory, it takes a twist on this. It's not quite the same thing. TE is actually more flexible in Socionics. TE is more interested in what works. How does it work? Right? I'm only interested in what works and what gets maximum productivity. Therefore, TE is more willing, more flexible at using any particular tool or method or technique that's going to get the job done here and now. I don't need to adhere to any specific system or methodology to do it. I'll do anything that works now. It's kind of more of a TE mentality. Now, TE does care about, you have to prove what works. Does it work? Prove to me that it works. Show me. Test it for me. This is very the science method of, I don't want your theory, and I don't care how good your theory sounds until you've tested it in some real concrete way where I can see, yep, that's working. I can see results show. Okay, that's what TE is more interested in. This is most apparent when you look at an ESTJ or LSE that's combining TE with sensory, with SI. So to them, they're often the type most likely to be uninterested in your grand theories or your possibilities and so on. And to them, they're like, Show me evidence. Show me the facts. Show me the research papers from real serious people that prove that it works or prove that it does what you say it does. You can't show me research. You can't show me it, then I don't care. I don't believe it. It sounds like snake oil shit. They tend to have more of an attitude like that. That's the TE looking for external data that's provable before they adopt it or use it. TI can come a lot more from, as it would sometimes said, axiomatic. So if you reason something well, we can talk about it in theory all day, and as long as everything logically fits and is well reasoned, we can get to a conclusion and go, yeah, okay, yeah, it's probably right. Even though there's no testable data or anything to prove that it's right, but everything makes sense and logically flows from one thing to the next. We're like, yeah, okay. TI can do that a lot more. And again, this is seen best with a TI and E type, so LIIs. They really like to spend that time in theory land, such as Socionics, such as all of typology stuff, where most of it is good theories, but it's not really provable. It's not testable entirely. There's a lot of areas it's not tested at all. There's no evidence for it. It's part of the reason why, let's say, if you look at Socionics, you run into a lot of LIIs, several of whom are the ones who are either creating models all the time. I mentioned Kiersey, I mentioned Galenko. You have ILEs who also use a lot of TI. Ashra Augusta herself was an ILE. I think Bukalov was an ILE. And on it goes. There's a lot of other people who are in the typology land, Socionics land. They're not major names, but they're LIIs. A bunch of them. And they're always coming up with stuff. Ben Vazelin, again, another LII. He has his own model. He has like Model V. Right? But it's theories based on theories based on theories. It's all very, very theoretical. Right? Hold on, there's more that comes on here. These ideas generally thought to be TE in nature. If TI is related to regs, it's TI with SE is what's happening in military culture a lot. So the TI that we're referring to here is how there's a structure to things. There's a way in which everything is done, prescribed, and it has its reasons. You may not like the reasons given, but it all has its reasons. It all has its method. It all has its coherent structure that everyone is meant to follow. So it's very TI with FE. This is how the culture is, how everybody does things. This is where all the regs come from. Now, a big part of TI is, again, that adherence to the structure. So usually when we talk about a TI individual, although they may sometimes take a long time to develop a structure, a theory, a way of looking at something, once they get there, they can be very unmovable. They can be very fixed or stubborn about their TI. This is the reasoning for it. This is how it all works. That's it. Not flexible, not bendable anymore when it comes to that. TE is always more flexible. As long as you can present good information and facts, TE tends to be a lot more flexible about, okay, I'll adopt your method then, and whoop, I'll just change. Happens a lot easier. Now, observation-wise, when we look at people that are very TI, we see this. We see people who tend to adhere to some kind of personal philosophy, framework, philosophical viewpoint, or maybe it's more academic of some sort. This is how this whole thing works. They've come up with this, and they're a lot more stubborn on those things. Perhaps no more so than the LSI, which is the ISTP. In the case of the LSI, you have TI with sensory, and they have no NE, very weak NE. So they're not interested in a lot of different possibilities. Oh, did you look at it from another way? What if you're wrong? There could be this and that. They're the most stubborn at not looking at other ways of doing stuff. They've come to their conclusion. This is my philosophy. This is my way of it. And that's the end of it. Now, LIIs are not quite as, they don't at least appear as stubborn as closed-minded, owing to the fact that they have NE, high NE. So to them, they're willing to hear you out. They'll listen to other things more. But they can still be very stubborn on their frameworks of something, especially in intellectual things, because that's where they thrive, some kind of intellectual abstract area. Remember certain professors who have their way and you could just tell, like, you're not going to break through that. Right. LSIs and MBTIs, TJ. So if you're familiar with MBTI, you could think of how ISTJs are described there, and that's kind of more or less what you're looking at with an LSI in Socionics. And I should... And let me see, once again... Let's go back to this again. Again, analysis, hierarchy, classification, understanding, order, system, structure, and formal logic. If we're in military land, I mean, structure, systems, order, things being classified as this or that, and hierarchies, huge. It's just being combined with SE and all the sensory stuff, such as analysis, hierarchy, understanding, order, combined with, down here with SE, authority, influence, political interest, competition, struggle, willpower, force. You put that together and you have LSI paradise, as well as SLEs and stuff like that. Right? This is part of the reason why, even though LIIs, you might have TI being very high, it still doesn't mean that you would necessarily thrive or do particularly well in military environments. Although the caveat to that, as I was saying yesterday, there's a lot of different career paths within military. So there's still areas that an LII could do very well in military environments. One of the things I don't think I really brought up yesterday was research and development, procurement. These are all things also within military where LIIs could potentially thrive. I should... That is not the same thing. Whatever, drop my little model thing on there. So anyway, that's where the TI stuff really kicks in from yesterday. It was a big part of the whole shebang. What are the areas that they're usually bad at, just in general? Again, if you look at the structure of it, we already mentioned beat it to death SE. LIIs are very much known to not be very assertive or forceful people. They're not very active people, is another key thing. They tend to prefer to spend a lot more time in their heads thinking about stuff, thinking about it in depth, taking their time, looking at it from different angles, taking different points of view, really working with it. They don't like to be rushed to do it. They're not in a hurry to get it out there. They don't see the point to that. To them, it's more important that we accurately get everything down right. We understand where all the pieces fit and where everything goes and all the everything makes sense. That is more important. So if that takes a long time, then it takes a long time. They don't see the need to get moving and just start getting things done when you haven't fully understood everything yet. So it's a big part of the lack of SE. Yesterday, that was a big part of my ranting and complaining, because that's one of the things that I personally, and I know others, would find aggravating with LIIs. And a lot of LIIs know that. They can sense that they're probably seen as kind of slow at getting things going and moving, and then they're exacerbating other people. LIIs can have a lot of struggle with the feeling arena in general. Okay, how they feel about other people can sometimes be a little questionable. They can take their time to try to figure out, how do I feel about it? What do I think of this person? But they'll get there eventually. They're not very good at being charismatic and showing a lot of emotion, really reaching to other people's emotions, being very just in that social extroverted kind of way. They tend to be so in their heads thinking and talking about things in this very principled, detached, academic kind of way that it's kind of a little dry, a little boring. And it lacks that fun charisma that kind of like is infectious and gets other people motivated and interested. This could be a sore spot for a lot of LIIs. This feeling of not being liked. I don't know how to make friends. I don't know how to attach to people. I'm not good at the thing, and I feel like people don't like me, or I feel like I'm just not able to do this. So some LIIs might shy away from people, be a little bit avoidant. Some LIIs, maybe not so much, but they're kind of aware that they're not so great with people. So maybe they hang out with people and they attach themselves to groups, but they might be that person who's sort of a little more of a wallflower, just kind of hanging in the background a little bit, not understanding kind of when to get involved. They're a little shy about it. And again, back to lacking SE, they don't have the assertiveness to make their presence felt, to really interject if they need to. They're not always so good at that either. So it can be a sore spot, is really the FE department. Another area of criticism, and one that goes around and around a lot. Yep. Another sore spot with them can be TE. Because they like the TI, the structured analysis, thinking it all through, combining this, really with a lot of the abstraction, they tend to spend a lot more time in theory land. So a lot of their ideas can be really good in theory, big quotation, in theory. But then there are many people who will say, well, that's nice in theory, but in the real world, it doesn't quite work that way, or it doesn't always work that way. There's a lot of gray areas, or there's a lot of other areas it doesn't quite show itself like that. Or yeah, in principle, in theory, maybe that's how you should do it or whatever, but it's not actually how it appears. And so this could be a criticism of theirs. Some of their theories are like, oh, it's a nice theory, but it's not useful. It's not practical. It's too complicated. It's too theoretical, or it takes too long to learn it. This is a common criticism about socionics in general, that it's so damn complicated and there's so many rules, there's so much structure to it, that some people say, well, it's just too damn complicated. It takes too long. And it looks too cold and dry and academic and mathy. It doesn't seem human anymore. It doesn't seem like we're actually talking about people in psychology. It seems like we've just turned people into some kind of a math equation. That's the effect of having too much TI thrown in there, right? And TE is just like ignored. A lot of LIIs are not as interested in what is practical and what gets the job done effectively now, or what has been proven recently with data and statistics to work. They're not always so concerned with these things. They're not always so concerned with empirical evidence to prove that this or that works. And they can spend more of their time focused on the theories, the underlying theory. And the theory sounds good, so let's stick with it. That's problematic for people who are very TE focused. It's problematic also for people who are simply very low on TI. So take Socionics. Again, lots of TI in Socionics. This can be very off-putting to gamma types and especially delta types that don't really value TI. They either don't use it much or they don't value it. They don't use it much. And from their point of view, they're like, this is just too mathy, too much structure, and I just don't see people like this. This just seems unnecessary to define and categorize things in this cold kind of way. This is part of the reason why, again, you look at Socionics, Typology world, and you find a lot of the alpha NTs, so LIIs, ILEs. You'll find a fair share of SLEs who also use TI quite a bit. You'll find your fair share, you'll find some LSIs. And then as you keep going down towards gamma and delta, you start to see less and less of them. They start dropping off. You kind of wonder, why is that? Well, too much damn TI. Bit of a problem there. Things that are worth learning tend to be complicated. Well, see. But that's a sentiment that might not be shared by all types. Right? And then you have to ask yourself, the method of learning. How are you choosing to learn the thing? Are you choosing to learn the thing by sitting and thinking about it, pondering it, categorizing it, breaking down its components in this logical kind of way? Or are you trying to learn a thing by doing the thing? Right? I'm not thinking about how does tennis work and the structure. I'm just playing tennis, as an example. Right? I'm just grabbing the ball and whacking the thing and just doing it, even without fully understanding all the rules and structure to it. Right? That might be an approach that a sensor might do. Some high feelers might learn things by just, how do I feel about the thing? How does it make me feel? What is the relationships involved? I don't really care so much about the underlying structures of things and how all the principles fit and everything goes together. Right? Just a different way of learning things. And what are you choosing to learn? LIIs typically, again, are very, very theoretical and abstract in their approach to things. Now, it's important to note that as an LII, it might not feel that way to you, because it might feel so normal to you that it just doesn't seem like an issue. It's just like, what's the big deal? But to outside observers, from their point of view, what you're doing comes across as very theoretical, very academic, with limited practical usage and taking too damn long. Another good comment that gets brought up a lot, you'll see LIIs, again, liking these models, these structures. Many LIIs struggle with people, that whole FE issue, and weaker FI as well. So they're attracted to these models, these definitions, these rules, this structure, this guideline on how to approach social situations and people and things. They kind of like that. They're like, yeah, that makes sense to me. I often notice that when you talk to people who are very FI heavy, to them, it's absurd. They're like, why do you need a model to understand this person? Like, why do I need rules? And I just deal with a person. I know I know what they're about. I can tell what their interests are, what they're about, who they're connected to. Like, wow, I don't need any model or structure to do that. Like, this just seems crazy to deal with, like, these kind of models. And a lot of FI types will feel that way. They'll bring that up a lot, especially someone like an EII, for example. Yeah. So rambling on left and right. One of the things I throw in there, maybe for the handful of newbies that are in there looking around at stuff, different places you can look at, different things to learn from other than myself. I obviously have my channel. You could scroll through all kinds of stuff I've got, but there are other people with interesting stuff. Now, for reading material, Psychology. Can I show this again here? Let's see. Let's see if I can do this stuff. Oh boy. Oh my. Oops. Let's try that again. Hope that's working. See, I don't like the way this pops up. All right, well, epic fail. Anyway, Psychology is one of them. That's by Ibrahim Tensor. His blog that he's got on there. You could check out World Socionics Society that's Jack's page. He's got a ton of stuff in there that you could read through. There's always the Wiki Socion, the giant encyclopedia everybody uses, right? I've shown sociotype.com. It's a nice, simple, very user-friendly site. Another one you could read through. Other people's channels, like YouTube channels. I mentioned Beats Hobble or Brian's Journey yesterday. There's World Socionics Society. There's Rusted Typology. These are pretty Socionics dedicated channels, but there are others that are good too. You have True Generations, which has a little bit of Socionics. That's Damon Gray's thing. DJ Granville. Need to give him a shout out from yesterday. DJ also has he's got some good stuff on there. Let me see if he tends to like to kind of go into rambles and stuff, and so it's a little bit more advanced, I would argue. It's kind of more for my intermediate. Okay, hopefully y'all are seeing that. Here's DJ. He's also good on Socionics and familiar. He's an SLE, so he has a lot of TI. And in fact, if you watch him talk about stuff, he also likes to deconstruct things and really analyze them and dive into all that. He's TI. He's showing you that he's TI. He's literally doing it while he's talking to you a lot on these channels. Somewhere in here, he's got stuff directly on TI. There you go. Rambling about Socionics, TI, structural logic, and so on. It's just rambling. He's very deconstructing it, going through it. You will see a lot of SLEs do that. All right, there you go. True Generations, here you go. Damon Gray, very good sociologist. He's not that active lately. He's kind of taking a break. You see, he's got a few things on here. Pretty good stuff. Again, another SLE, and you will see that SLEs can do very good at TI. They like to play with it quite a lot. Someone else I forgot to mention. Where's he at? Trey. Where's Trey? That's not. I got that wrong, didn't I? Yes, I did. Okay. I am totally screwing that up. Bam, there's Trey's stuff. Well, some of my videos, some of it. There we go. Here we go. Trey. Another good Socionics right there. And he's got quite a bit of stuff on here, including the basics. So another person you could listen to.
All right.
These are some,
So, what I want to talk about
oh, he's talking.
has to do with.
All right, let's stop that. Okay, so yeah, these are all people with some channels that are out there. There's a few others and stuff. Amy Y has been dabbling with a lot of Socionic stuff lately. So those are all people who have some good stuff. So you don't have to just rely on my point of view. Sometimes you hear it from a different person, and just the way they describe something just, might click better for you. All right, let's go through some of these comments, see what's up. Armchair versus hands-on approach. Yes, that's generally how LIIs do stuff. They like to think it through. They take their time. They don't like to engage with stuff directly. They like to analyze things. Oh, thank you. Chocolate bar break. All right. So yeah, generally they're often probably stressed out if they're forced to get up and rapidly start doing something. They got to do it right away. They don't feel like they had enough time to really think about it. That's probably going to be very stressful for them. Kiersey was a fighter pilot back in World War II. I believe he was drafted, probably whatever, and became a fighter pilot, likely due to his education, intelligence, whatever. And he became a Marine fighter pilot, of all things. And I recall him mention that he found it very stressful. I'm amazed he did it at all, but he found it very stressful. So it kind of shows you that LIIs, again, they can do military, manly stuff, right? That's not necessarily academic. It's possible they can do it, but more than likely they're going to find it very stressful and not appealing. It's not their bag. As far as typology, like most people, one day my wife just handed me one of these little MBTI tests. Oh, look, take this thing. Took it, and I found it interesting. I started looking through it, and I never stopped. I just kept trying to understand all the different MBTI things, and from MBTI that turns into a springboard where now you're looking at a whole bunch of other systems. So over the years, there's been MBTI, there's been Big Five, there's been Helen Fisher's system. I have seen Linda Barron's stuff. I have seen a lot of Kiersey's stuff. Everybody else, I've seen a lot of Dario Nardi stuff. I've seen a lot of people's shit over the years. Eventually, Socionics was creeping in, which is kind of how it happens for a lot of people. You're playing around with the other systems and stuff, and someone's talking about something that relates to Socionics or it comes from Socionics. So you'll see some other channels that are 16 personalities or whatever, and they're making references to the polar function. They're making references to blocking techniques that are used from Socionics, or they're making references to the intertype relations, which is arguably the biggest contribution Socionics brings to the table. And after a while, you keep looking at that and you're like, what is this Socionics thing? And then you just keep going. And then I fell into Socionics stuff and started looking around at that and became one of those people that I kind of like Socionics more than a lot of the other systems. But there are other systems I like a lot, and I still play with them, probably on equal footing to Socionics. But I view them as kind of a separate thing. I don't like to mash it all up the way LIIs like to mash everything together. Yeah, let's leave it at that for now. Thank you, Mac. Or Mess, however pronounce your name. Thank you. The TI structure mode is very easy and basic. It's the SE that seems less interesting, especially SE dominant personalities whom would rather use demanding force than debate. Right. Yeah. So that's another thing you can expect for LIIs. They want to do things intellectually, logically. Let's discuss it. Let's debate it. Let's, rationally figure out what's really working and what's not. Like they don't understand the need for the use of force. Why should I force someone to do something, or force a system onto someone? They also don't understand the need for speed. You have the need for speed. They don't really understand this drive towards, like, why does it have to be done now? What's the hurry? What's the rush? Let's talk it over. Let's take our time. Let's make sure that everything is lining up right. That's more important. If it takes time, it takes time. Why the rush? They don't appreciate that. They don't like that. They completely evade that as much as they can get away with it. So it makes sense that everything that shows that SE, that physical action, that taking action, getting up off your ass and moving to do stuff, doing it quickly, having a sense of urgency, a sense of getting it done as quickly as you can get it done. Force, coercion, they just don't understand that stuff, or they don't value it at all. When I say they don't understand it, I want to clarify that by saying that it doesn't mean that they are like somehow like they can't comprehend this. It just, they really don't see the need for it. They just don't see why we have to do this at all. Why can't we as a society just like not use SE stuff at all? Why should we deal with that? They really evade that as much as they can. Hopefully that kind of resonates. Trey 4L, Trey for life. What the hell did I put in it? Trey 4? I don't know. I went all over it. I think at that point I got Trey songs in there. Whatever. But we got there, right? Trey stuff. He's got a lot of good, simple, to the point stuff. That's kind of how I like to put it out there, and I think it's best for people. Simple, straight to the point, for whatever it is you're looking for. So he's got some stuff like that. Yeah, let's see. Not charismatic and fake. Over emotional. Ill or I'll present the information, but people want a personality show of facade to entertain them. It is. Okay. I get what you're trying to say. Yes. Part of the reason why LIIs can seem very, that stereotype of the cold, purely logical Oxford professor in the tweed jacket who's explaining to you microbiology, and it just, and it lacks any charisma, any speed, any liveliness at all. If you want to watch like a, I think, look, for observation purposes, and I understand this might come across as some people like I'm attacking them or I'm picking on them, and that's not what I'm doing. That's not my intention. My intent is to give you something observable and empirical that you can look at and compare and contrast it. Go check out Ben Vazen's channel. Look what he's doing. Notice the slower speech pattern, taking his time, using a lot of different systems, really trying to nerd out. A lot of his videos can be very, very long because he's taking his time to really play with all these things. Compare that to rusted typology. Everything is fast, to the point, simplified. This is it. It might almost seem too damn simplified, right? But it's quick and it's a lot of high energy, and he doesn't always care about speaking in very accurate, precise terms. He can speak in very over the top, emotive language that's meant to be funny or meant to poke fun at some or just fuck with you or whatever, etc. Right? And you see two very different styles, even though both can use TI. If you check out Damon Gray, whenever he pops up on videos and stuff, you will see that he speaks very quickly. He gets to the point. It's bam, let's get there. Let's do it. Let's get after it already. Be very crisp and precise at what he's trying to say. Very good TI, right? So you can compare and contrast how these people present. Let's see what's going on here. Okay. Something I haven't really talked about much. LIIs are, remember, they're an alpha quadra type, so they do value FE, particularly being in a more pleasant atmosphere, something that's comfortable, that's fun. Everybody is having a good time or getting along well, and people are not being too pushy or aggressive or whatnot. They value that kind of atmosphere. They don't know how to create it themselves, and that's where they need their ESE counterparts to do that, or an SEI. Bring that along. Who usually care a little bit about it. The types that don't give a shit would be a type like an ILI. ILI really just doesn't give a crap about the environment of anything. Same goes for an SLI, but they're not an NT. So let's carry on. Time to catch up. Yeah, it's a fair enough sentiment. There are many types that are not LI that also feel this way as well. So this is not entirely specific to an LII, but your point is taken. So for TE types, there are times when you might look up something and see how it works or whatever, how it's been shown to work. But some TE types may also be very interested in figuring out more effective methods of making it work better. Experimenting themselves, tinkering with it, and seeing, can I make a 10% increase, 5% increase on this? Can I find some way it's a little more effective, even if not universally effective, maybe just more effective for me and my particular context that I'm working in? So that could be a thing. Trying to apply Socionics-based ITR to MBTI is so flawed. Socionics-based ITR, intertype relations? I'm guessing that's what that means. Yeah. Again, Socionics defines certain terms, or what MBTI would call functions, differently. So types don't always cross over one for one. That's a big problem. That's going to screw up your whole intertype relations if someone is typed wrong, right? So, yeah. That's part of one of the complaints for when you do run into certain individuals that want to combine all the systems together and try to create some super system. Many people resist because they will point out there's a lot of fundamental differences in how things are defined and approached and the methods used. So it's not one for one. Things are not going to work out quite so well, right? And that debate rages on all the time. Usually it's LIIs that are trying to combine a bunch of shit at the same time. Yeah, again, same thing. How do LIIs experience introverted ethics? Poorly. um, these are types that usually can tell who they like and who they don't like. They can tell through feelings, like I get along well with this person, we have interests, or have a certain sense of someone's, let's call it their character, their nature. They can not be totally terrible at this. They have some idea of this, but they're still not particularly very good at it. They're still a little weak. They prefer to work from their theoretical frames of stuff, structure, rules, logic. So it's weak. Now it's important to note the difference with like an ILE who is FI polar. A lot of ILEs really struggle to figure out who do I like, who do I not like, based on just how I feel about them, or based on their character and their nature, and I just like that person for who they are, whatever. They really have a hard time with that. I do have a video on there kind of breaking that down in real time. So there was a typing session Jack did with someone for ILE, and I took a piece of that video just to show the part about how when they were asked about how they feel about someone, like it's like their mind broke. They just were like, I don't even know how to answer that. And they looked more excited about scientific models than they did about any person. So you could see when it's more in the polar area. So LIIs are not that bad. They can tell that they kind of like some people and how close they are to them. They have some understanding of that. Yes. Yeah. The philosopher king kind of archetype would apply very well to LIIs, IEIs, maybe some EIIs um, to an extent. And even ILI a little bit too. But the two types that I would say really fit the philosopher king archetype, which I think is exactly what Plato was going for, is IEI and LII. I kind of personally feel like Plato was probably an IEI. By the way, IEI and IEI, which is the INFJ and MBTI world, and LIIs can sometimes look a little alike when you're talking to them or you're sort of seeing them, because IEIs can also come across very philosophical, very professorial, very academic, flaunting a lot of TI usage too. So it might take you a little bit for you to tell the difference sometimes. Shouldn't take you that long, but they can, look alike is my point. Polar SE itself in libertarian political values. No. Libertarian political values, you'll find that across the boards. A lot of different types will be interested in libertarian views for different reasons. So really what you're looking for is, okay, you're libertarian. Why? What is it about being a libertarian that intrigues you or that you enjoy or whatnot? And now we're starting to dig deeper into the person's motivations as to why they're attracted to that thing. This is the important part when doing any sort of typing, especially like interview-based typing and stuff like that. You're trying to look beyond their interests and into what are your motivations for that. Why do you like doing that? What is it about it that you're after? What parts of it do you enjoy? And you're digging deeper. I do see a lot of LIIs or ILEs also that like libertarian stuff, or at least I see a lot of them talking about it. It's very common. Philosopher King, yep, we know. LIIs are informative, yep. Again, they're not action takers. If it's Linda Barons you're talking about, this is a what is it like about? Should be a behind the scenes type. That's what would make sense. Again, quiet, introverted, taking their time, figuring stuff out, sharing what they've learned with other people, trying to teach them stuff. So should be like a behind the scenes kind of personality. Then why would an FE polar type be reluctant to take the more efficient route? Because the FE polar still doesn't grasp the point of the FE. To them, they're like, I don't need to be charismatic. It shouldn't need to be charismatic. Fuck charisma. The information should stand for itself. Right? It's obvious the way it is. Why the fuck do I need to convey any kind of emotion with it? Why should I make it funny or dramatic or whatever? Who cares? It should just be what it is. Right? That's a very much a devaluing of FE stuff. So they're not making the correlation that, oh, the FE is going to make this more efficient. Just won't. Pretty much. Not only that, but being charismatic is not always the more efficient way anyway. Being charismatic, using a lot of FE can come at the cost of TE. So sometimes being very dramatic, very showy, very flashy, yeah, that's all good and well, and it's fun and entertaining, but it's not very informative on the facts, the details, the real point at hand. So a lot of your gamma NTs, for example, will feel that way. I think gamma types, more than any other group, all the gammas, can get that sense, that feeling of like, yeah, all this flash and pizzazz and emotive energy and stuff, yeah, that's all good and well, but it doesn't solve the problem. It doesn't fix anything. It's not giving me the information I really need. So I don't give a shit about all this flashy emotion. I think all the gammas can, the gamma NTs most of all. I'm glad I don't value FIs. The heart is deceptive. This is a good point that LIIs, for example, may feel this way. That to them, it's like, no, I'm going to rely on good logical reasoning. It has to make logical sense and things have to connect really well. And I trust that. I trust that to make my decisions or to come to some kind of a viewpoint on something, come to a strong stance on something. It has to have good reasoning for it. I don't trust my emotive feelings. Feelings are too fickle. I don't like it. Right? That's their attitude towards it. But high feelers, especially FI types, would obviously disagree. They're like, no, I trust my feelings. Or my feelings matter more. Who gives a shit about your logical conclusions? Could be wrong. Your theories is exactly that, a theory. It's not proven to be anything. Who gives a shit? We're all going to die anyway. I might as well enjoy what I'm feeling. You know, they can take up those kinds of attitudes about logical things. So this is why we see different personalities. And she put on their mind can be too, which is, yeah, you can come to your own logical reasoning. Socionics likes to get into these dichotomies that all thinking is external. It can be shown, it can be proven. We can all look at it. It's detached from us. We don't feel it, right? We just step back and think about it. So it's thinking in general is considered an external thing to us. It's part of the dichotomies. Now that's something that if you go listen to Ben Vaselin, he loses his mind about it. He attacks the shit out of that because he likes to say, well, if all thinking is like external and so on, like it then we should all easily get it. But yet we always have to keep referring to what do you mean by that? We don't always interpret it the same way, whatever. It's part of my point. We could all come to our own rhyme and reason that makes logical sense to us. and other people don't agree with your logic. Your logic isn't so perfect that we all have to agree with it. There's some sense with that, but anyway. Point being, yeah, your logical reasoning can fool you into all kinds of bullshit. How does SE polar manifest differently in the LII versus the EII? You know, in a lot of ways, I feel like it doesn't. I feel like it's very similar. It's so fucking similar. Like I don't. Both can be very slow to take action on things. They're slow. They move at a slow pace. They don't want to be rushed to do things. They don't see the point. Both don't see the point of forcing people to do things using your thinking process or your feelings on other people, imposing your methods on others. They don't neither agree with that shit. I already mentioned being slow. Both can be slow to take action on things. So they can spend a lot of time thinking and ruminating on something, whatever is interesting to them and whatnot. And from the time of thinking about it, trying to get to a decision, to therefore act on it, can be incredibly slow. And I mean like months or years slow. Where they just sit there like, yeah, I've always wanted to do this thing. I always thought it would be kind of cool, or like maybe go into that business or try this thing. And years can go by before they ever do it. And they may need someone else to push them into it. Like it, painfully slow. Compare that to somebody who's very high on SE, especially an SE dominant. Those individuals usually act very quickly. It's not long for them to come to a decision and then begin taking steps to make that happen, do something about it. Now, the problem they can run into is maybe they sometimes need to slow down and think about it more. Maybe they didn't fully understand what they were getting themselves into. Maybe they didn't take enough time to deeply reflect and make sure that the path they're going on is a good path years in down the future. That could be a problem for the high SE types. But the high SE is usually types that act quickly. They don't want to spend a lot of time lingering. I think a difference you can find also, and you can observe this in conversations online, people, whatever different types. You can see certain people that are maybe high SE, and you'll notice they tend to speak quickly, make up their mind quickly, engage directly about what it is they want to say. They just say it, fix it later. They'll just say it and get moving. And they can get irritated when interacting with other types that are on the other side of the coin. ILIs, IEIs, LIIs. These are all types that can be very slow to respond because they want to think it through. They want to, let me make sure I know what I want to say next. Let me get my words right. Etc. And for a lot of SE types, that's just, they can get really painfully annoyed at that. Like, for fuck's sake, get to it already. Like, why is Jesus? The pace is so slow. Like, I think also FE Polar probably doesn't care what other people choose to think or believe and doesn't feel desire to try to convince them. Yes. Yeah. That's very common with many FE Polar types. But there's a little discrepancies here. Like, some FE Polar types are not always so they're not always so non-caring or oblivious. They can sometimes tell, like, yeah, okay, this is not very charismatic or interesting, but they generally just can't find it within them to emote and show a whole lot of interest in how other people feel about stuff, get too excited about things. can make a lot of them look very bland talking, just no expression, just nothing, just they're just very matter of fact and dry. And they may not give a crap at all about that criticism. They may say, yeah, I look bland and dry. I don't care. Whatever. I know what I think. I've come to a good, sound conclusion based on evidence. Good enough for me. If you're smart, you'll take my advice. And if not, fuck you. That's your problem. It makes them very, very cold. How does an ideology help LIIs in terms of how to be living a certain way of life? Living a certain way of life. Well, to them, and it's not going to be all of them, but to them, having a framework, this is what's consistent, this is shown to work, this is what things are all about. And I'm going to stay consistent to that. That is just the way to do things. Some of them may not understand any other way to do it. They're looking at everyone else like, what's wrong with you guys? Why aren't you having some kind of framework? What the fuck's wrong with you people? Let me see if I... Oh, whatever. Anyway. I would think of someone like a Kant, for example, somebody like that. They come up with a certain philosophy on life in general, and this is what they stick to. I think for this, you might have to ask yourself, how does every other type value what they value? Like what is going on there? Why do they care about that? Why does an EII value their own feelings about things so much? Why? A moment ago, look at Jared over here saying, I'm glad I don't value FI because the heart is deceptive. But a well-reasoned structure of how to view things, oh, well, that's good because it's been well-reasoned. It's been thought through logically, dispassionately. We see how it all works out, and that's trustworthy. That's how an LII might think, or some other NTs. But to an EII, they're doing the exact opposite. To them, they're like, what do you mean you're not going to follow your FI? So you're going to live your life cold, like a robot that follows some kind of a programming, some kind of algorithm? That's how an EII might think. It's like, how do you live your life if you can't tell how you feel about certain things or certain people or certain stuff? Doesn't make sense. Right? This is why we bother with typology and stuff. We start to open our minds to how other types see things totally differently. Their perspective on stuff is completely different. And a lot of other stuff. Look for EIIs and I's that are SE polar. They don't understand. They must have a weird relationship trying to understand SE dominant types. A weird relationship trying to understand what SLEs are all about, or SEEs, or even other types that have SE in the ego. They must be like, why would anybody, why use force for shit? Like, why have to act and move on stuff quickly like that? What the fuck is the point of that? Why do you look at life like a competitive battlefield? Why are you striving to acquire things, objects? What's the point in that? What value does that bring to your life? Right? They're having a hard time wrapping their mind around why would an SE type do what it does, and vice versa. It's the whole point of typology. Figuring out why you think the way you do and what other types feel and why do they value what they value. What's going on there? In fact, all this stuff. Look at SE. Uh-oh. Let's go to the SE part here, right? Authority, influence, desire, political interest, personal investment, competition, struggle, willpower, impact, force, appearance, readiness, tactics, territory. Right? There's a lot of stuff in here that maybe a lot of your SE polar types, they just don't see the why. What is the point of competing and struggling for things? Why do we have to struggle for anything? Why can't we just try to minimize struggle and competition as much as possible? Why do I have to will my way through shit? Appearance, whatever. I want to be comfortable. I don't know. Why do I have to have any kind of shock value in my appearance? Oh, political interest and political interest. I got to deal with politics and all that bullshit and arguing and dealing with. Oh, no. Why would anybody want to do that? Right? Having influence, authority, right? A lot of SE polar types, they don't see the use of this very much, or they see it, they get it logically why that's important, but they're just like, I don't care. I don't want to deal with that. All the FI stuff in here. Likes, dislike, decency, niceness, morals, good, bad, etiquette, attraction, repulsion, having empathy for others. Your attitude towards other human beings, it's not based on just some rules. Seems like important stuff, but maybe not to somebody who's FI polar. They don't know how to do this. So anyway, I'm rambling. Huh. Time to go. It seems like TI has a categorical way of seeing morality and finding some logical reasoning as to why things are the way they are. I do see LII as being part of some political party. Yeah, it's kind of the whole point. LIIs are, and TI can be very, very categorical. There's rhyme and reason for why they do stuff. There has to be good logical reasoning for it. And some LIIs, will be in political parties. Absolutely. There's some types that, will run for high office and things like that. You will have LIIs. Let me see. There's some people. What's this guy's name? American senator from Vermont. Another great socialist liberal type. Forgot his name now. He's often thought sometimes an LII. Lots of principles that he believes in and values. The namesake, the Russian name for an LII, is it Robespierre, which was the French lawyer who was spearheading the French Revolution. And thanks to him, tons of people got guillotined. Right? He wasn't the one directly killing these people, but he was following a certain strict set of principles. And what these principles say is that's what we're going to follow. That's what we're going to do, right? It is very political. It's law and order, legal stuff, TI. Let's see here. It's bizarre to me. People value SE. It seems so base. There you go. Somebody who's SE polar or just doesn't, or non-valuing. Yeah, they don't. They're just like, they don't get it. They don't get it. It's like, why? Fuck is the point of that? But you have to understand that SE valuing people can look at you the other way around, where they're like, why do you not value it? Why do you value these other things? And it's the point of the differences. Differences in people makes life interesting. I get. Yep. Yeah. And you're right, Bernie Sanders, that was his name. Searching for it. Bernie Sanders, people thought he had FI as a base function since he seems so moral and care about helping other people. Right. This is where MBTI world views FI as being morality based. They throw that in there, morals. People who are highly moral is an FI thing. But in some, no, we greatly devalue using morality as a definition of FI. We can look at morality as being a highly complicated thing that can come from a lot of different areas, and it's not that. One of the best descriptions, Jack said this actually in a conversation, and I like the way he said it there. It was just, so I'm gonna give him credit for that. But basically, what he was saying on there was like, if you can write down your morals and values, and you could all write it all out on a sheet of paper and hand it over to somebody, these are my consistent values and morals that I always have. Like, that's not FI. It's more of TI. FI is more in the moment. It's your feelings towards other people. It changes depending on the person. I feel a certain way about this person. I feel a certain way about that person. It's hard to articulate what those feelings are. And it's not a system of any sort. There's no system of anything. This is just how I feel about this particular person or this particular thing. Purely sentimental, purely emotional. This is where FI and TI clash. They contradict each other. Get rid of some of these things up here. Right. There you go. I was waiting for it. There you go. Yes, morality for me is more of a logical algorithm for how I should treat others as I would like to be treated. Yes. So it's thought. All right, there we go. Got back. Yep, kind of lost a little connectivity there. Okay, where was I? Back to this. Yes, morality for me is more of a logical algorithm for how I treat others as I would like to be treated. Correct. This is what we would expect from a TI person, a very heavy TI person. So LIIs, ILEs, SLEs, LSIs. There's a lot of this going on with all of those types. They can have algorithmic-like approach, principles. These are my principles. Right? This is what is wrong. This is how things should be done, and so on. Here's the reasoning that I came to this conclusion, or whatever, this structure that I have. But there it is. And it is this dispassionate use that I'm going to have no matter the situation, no matter who's involved. Right? I believe this is the law and that's the way this should be done. And if you violate that, well, you're going to be punished according to the structure, according to the way it is, regardless of who's involved. I don't care if it's my daughter. I don't care if it's my sibling. It doesn't matter. There's a very cold, dispassionate kind of approach to it. That's not concerned with the circumstances of the situation, the context of why something. This is the way the thing is laid out. That's the sort of vibe, the theme that's going on there. When we go back to TI and military, there are rules, there's structure, there's a way to do things, there is a code of conduct, that's how things are done, period. Doesn't matter the situation, it doesn't matter who's involved. Doesn't matter the rank or the individual. You violate those rules, there will be consequences, there will be punishment. And the punishment is also going to be laid out already ahead of time. It's already thought of what that punishment will be, and everyone will suffer the same kind of consequences, the same kind of punishment, whatever. So the individuals involved are completely irrelevant. At least that's the idea, it's the intent. Irrelevant who's involved. FI is the opposite of this. FI is, no, it does matter who's involved. It changes what we're going to do about this situation, how we're going to look at it. Who's involved makes a big difference. So it's that universality approach versus a very individual, personal kind of way. Right? That's the big difference. And that's why FI and TI clash with each other. They're mutually exclusive of each other, let's say. Very big sticking point if you're trying to differentiate between who's using FI or TI more. All right, I'm going to wrap it up soon. Let's see what we got going on. TI morality is dogmatic, and I can get why you hold these beliefs to be true because they survived your logic dummy test, but I prefer the organic nature of FI, even if imperfect. See? And again, typeset value FI, that's kind of how they're going to approach things. FI is more important to me than your TI stuff. TI valuing people, see it the other way around. Yeah, my SLE is irritating because his TI makes so much sense almost all the time, but it's so detached and impersonal. I don't know how it feels good to use. Well, there's a good chance that your SLE is not feeling one way or the other about it. A lot of SLEs can come across very robotic that way, like an android that they don't feel anything. To them, it's just, look, that's what makes sense. That's the logic. That's the end of the story. Fuck your feelings. Many SLEs can come across that way. It doesn't mean they don't have feelings, but that's usually kind of how they operate. But it's not about feeling, of course. It's about being consistent from yes. So it's important to note that just because somebody is TI valuing high TIU doesn't mean they don't have feelings. It doesn't mean they can't feel bad about something. But they are going to typically lean on the principles, the logic of the situation more. That's going to be more important to them than how the feelings of the situation. They will suppress those feelings in favor of the logical reasoning, the principles at hand. I don't know if you guys ever saw Game of Thrones, but you had Stannis Baratheon, considered LSI. I agree. I'd say he's a very good LSI. In the later seasons, there's a moment there where he's told he needs to burn his daughter at the stake in order to gain victory. His God, the Lord of Light, demands it, a sacrifice, and it has to be his daughter in order to do it. You can see he feels bad. It's his daughter, and there's feeling there. But in the end, he follows his God's commandment. He follows what must be done. And he burns his own daughter at the stake. To a lot of high FI valuing people, that shit ain't gonna fly. It's not gonna happen. They would tell God to go fuck himself. I'm not burning my daughter at the stake, because their personal sentiment matters more. Right? It's just a difference in the values. Yes, subjective emotionality. This is where TI and FE come together, because you can come up with principles and logical consistency that is universal towards everybody. Everybody can see where you're coming from. Everybody can see the consistency, the rhyme and for your principles, and they can all employ those principles together. A whole community can do it. That's what religions, dogmatic religions, are based off of. That's what law and order is based off of, right? In the American system, law is meant to be blind and just, equal to everyone, regardless of social standing, of who they are, doesn't matter. That's the intent. And it's meant to govern everybody. We all play by those rules. For FI, doesn't work that way. The individual does matter. The individual does make a difference. Who they are, what's their character, what's their nature. How do I feel about that person? What is the context of going on there? Now we have TE and FI going together. Matter, and they will go around the rules or flat out break the rules in favor of their FI or TE. Oh yeah, this is funny. Yeah, Abraham was going to sacrifice his only son in the Bible. Yeah, well, this is, by the way, again, another reason why, if you are looking at the quadras, even though they're describing quadras in an abstract way, it's important. They're not being literal. They're being a little bit more abstract. Beta is more in line with religion. Just religion and religious societies. So there's more of this discussion about ancient Egypt. Very religious society, has a pantheon of gods and religious rituals and things that need to be followed, and a certain way of doing things. That would be seen as a very beta-like civilization because of that. Other civilizations that follow gods, if we get to the Crusades or medieval Europe, medieval times, Africa and Middle East, where you have a lot of Islam and so on, and this very strict adherence to Christianity or Islam, and then they're all fighting each other over it. This is very beta kind of stuff. Okay, abstractly speaking, this is much more in line with beta values at work here. God wills it, God commands it, so it must be done. SE now, we're going to take action and enforce it. What else we want to mention on there? Kind of notice how bright this is to stare at this for so long. Anyway, I guess in wrapping up, luckily for LIIs, which is kind of what this was supposed to be about, they are not the aggressive type who's going to go running around beating people to death, putting people at the stake, punishing lawbreakers and stuff like that. They're not the types to be interested in that. They're not interested in the SE things. So they don't do that. They'll have their own view of something, but they're not actively doing it. Who was a good Thomas Jefferson, also an American, also seen as LII, which I think is probably right. Um, and while you had certain American founding fathers who were revolutionaries, they were actively campaigning, making a business, rebelling, leading an army in battle against the British, doing all kinds of stuff. You'd see some characters like a Thomas Jefferson who really wasn't actively doing all that. He was like a academic, writing articles, writing down the principles. This is what we value and don't value. And he would send this kind of correspondence and things, writing pieces of the Declaration of Independence and so on, and writing out the principles that we value. Okay, all abstract stuff, but not actually doing the thing. That gets brought up a lot. Bernie Sanders, you see him running around explaining his viewpoint on stuff, but he's not forcibly ramming it down your throat in any way. He's not being that aggressive about it. Not really. Yeah. Typical for deltas. Like the introverted feeling approach that lead to favoritism, nepotism, and I see a lot of that in society. Getting promotions and more lenient sentences in crime because of that. Right. Because again, you want to stick to a principal value that always stands true. It doesn't change depending on the person or circumstances. It's totally impartial. This is the principle, we either adhere to it or we don't. This is the law, we adhere to it or we don't. That's it. Um, in the context of nepotism, there's another problem there, and that is we're referring to some FI things perhaps, but not TE. So one of the big problems with nepotism is that you, of course, appoint a sibling, a child, whatever, to a position that they don't deserve it. And when it really goes to shit is when it's somebody who is not qualified. They're not good enough for this. So the classic king who hands the throne over to his son, the prince, but the prince is inept. He's a moron. He's not worthy of leading the kingdom. He lacks in some way. There's a competency there that is missing. So we must bear in mind that at least FI doesn't work alone. It also has you can see some individuals doing this nepotism shit and they're not even FI valuing types. A Donald Trump like figure, for example. All right, I'm going to wrap this up in 2 minutes. I already said that a little while ago. Let me just get to these last bit of questions. What fields do you specialize in outside of academia? I think the better way of framing this is it's the environment. This is kind of the way I like to approach stuff. You need to, whatever job, career path, okay, what is the actual environment in? What does that look like? Is it an office job? Am I sitting in an office? Am I alone in that office? Do I have other people? Is it a job that I'm required to work with a team of people constantly? Is it a job that's outside? Do I have to deal with the environment, the weather? Is it a job where it's inside and I have air conditioning? Is it a job that requires a lot of salesmanship and charisma and emoting a lot, or something like that? Is it a job that's purely analytical? I just have to analyze the information and come to a conclusion. I write a report or something. It's paying attention to those details and then realizing, okay, that's an environment that I can operate in as an LII. So for all this time, LIIs don't like, they're not very good in environments that are very dynamic and require you to respond quickly. verbally respond or physically get up and start moving and completing tasks. They don't like environments where you have to try to get a lot of things done, physically done in a day. Yeah, they competitive environments. Being in an environment that is too much of a team thing, and there's a persuasion and convincing, it's not analytical based. It's not a good environment for them. Um, yeah, stuff like that. That's kind of how you want to frame what you're looking at as to whether that type would be a good fit in that environment or not. Um, this is why academia gets brought up so damn much because one, LIIs mentioned a lot, but two, LIIs can usually do well in an academic environment where they're if they're the professor or the researcher, it's not a competitive environment in the sense that you're not there to compete and clash with your students. You're the professor. You're already in charge. You don't need to do that. You can, in many academic fields, take your time to do research, analyze stuff, come to your conclusion, let your theories blossom, write out the principles. You can do all that, right? It's not a very physical job. Depending on the field, having emotion doesn't matter either, right? Those stuff to think about. James Madison was LII. Highly doubt Jefferson was. Okay, why not? He might not be, but I'd say Jefferson is a good possible, or maybe an ILI. Madison as an LII also would be a very good contender. Poor guy getting the White House burnt down. Thank you for the War of 1812, asshole. Yeah, if I can be partial, I'd probably want to be judged by a TI user in court. Yeah, take your pick. Yeah, if I was innocent. Well, even then, it doesn't go wrong and you're falsely thrown in prison. Bernie Sanders has EII values, not LII values. What the fuck are EII values? Outside of saying the cognitive stack, he has FI values, not LII values. Why? Again, make your case. Oh shit, the things just keep on coming. Savages. Respected for the principal structure that it is, there's too many religion denominations and choice to believe in any one of them. Okay, but still valuing the principles and rules and model GMI shows LIIs prefer to use NI on the job and NE off on their own time for fun. Perhaps they'd be able to use both pretty damn well. So there's no reason why LIIs could not have a job where they're playing with a lot of NE and NI. I'm also not a big fan of religion. I do get that people find footing, but it does hinder the potential of what people can do. Yeah. Again, to each their own. LIs seem fit for academia because they just keep learning. That too. They usually enjoy that as well. With no pressure to get out into the world and make shit happen. Just stay within the learning environment forever. Professor's like a tenured student with funding. Yeah, it's a good way of looking at it. If you can get there. All this information is helping me narrow my choice. Unfortunately, can't get into academia. I need to get a job that pays immediately. People want immediate SE results and bills. Yeah, that's one of the problems when some of these stereotypes of roles, like an academic is a classic area for LII types to go into. But let's face it, not everybody can do that. and not everybody can do it right away because you're probably going to need to go get your PhD or your doctorate or whatever, and that takes time. In the meantime, you got to go make some money and do something, right? And the same applies for everybody, every type. Every type has to, at some point, go, hey, get a job, make some fucking money, do something. Even if it's a job that is not what you would ideally want to be doing. Oof. This is part of the reason when you're typing people, you can't, you got to take whatever their job currently is or jobs that they've done with a grain of salt. All right. Birdie is a socialist. Yeah. So that doesn't make him an EII. That's probably why I do not want to leave academia anytime soon. Quite possibly. There are other types that also feel this way. They would just love to be in academia forever. But LIIs are probably the type most likely to want to do that and to just love it, thrive in it. Some ILEs will do this as well, and even some IEEs can often really enjoy learning all kinds of stuff and being a perpetual student. LIIs, again, to some degree, ILEs, but LIIs, again, really more than any other type embody that classic tenured professor type that really just fits right in there. With the inclusion of the being the boring, dry professor that a lot of students are just like, taking the class, they move on. Madison was weak and got pushed around like LIs do. Thomas Jefferson was too ambitious to be an LII. Too ambitious to be an LII. Why? Ambitious in what way? Again, you got to put a lot more info about these types. Madison, I agree with you. He probably was an LII. I see no reason to question that. I'm not definitive on it, but I think making a case for Madison being LII is pretty simple to do. It's not, and he was very foolish in his attempt at trying to defend the White House from the British. He was clearly way outside of his element. Props for trying, but boy, you were way outside your element. Thomas Jefferson. Jefferson wasn't exactly Mr. Tough Guy either. So very much the philosophical professorial type who did almost everything through correspondence and did everything through writing and so on. So LII is still very much in the mix. And ambitious, what? Why? Because he became president? So did Madison. So you need more. You need more of a workup here on Thomas Jefferson as to why. And I'm perfectly glad to nerd out on you on this. I loved the presidents and all that kind of shit. So feel free. Put in the Facebook thing. My job as a CDL driver. I never hear. It's mundane and boring, but pays the bill. So definitely would use job to determine. Wouldn't use job to determine. I'm doing the best I can. Opportunity. Yeah. Again, you. It's just obvious, right? Everybody at some point has to work and get a job and deal with whatever circumstances they find themselves in. So, you always got to thoroughly ask, why are you doing that job? Is it something you want to be doing? Is it something whatever? And then get to the underlying motives. And you'll find someone says, nah, man, I don't like this job much. Listen, it's just what I could get, and that's what I'm doing, and it pays bills. Okay, what would you rather be doing? Well, I'm more interested in these things. That's what I would be doing. Oh, okay. Now we're getting closer to what the type is, right? So, yeah. Okay. All right. I'm ending it here before this never ends. Look forward to hearing more about Thomas Jefferson and what type you think he was and ambition and so on. It'd be great. I could see maybe an argument for an IL out of that. But I'm open to it. Love to see it. So go for it. Look forward to hearing it. Signing off.